All right, Genesis 47. We'll pick it up tonight with verse 13. Read verses 13 through 26, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. But let's just read through these verses with this story, continuing with Joseph and the famine, with his family back together now, and with him in Egypt, and with Pharaoh. And as we read it, think about what it would be like to be in a land where you were the foreigner, and you depended on the goodwill of whoever was leading that country. And how much you might need their help. So verse 13. Now there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very severe. So that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. So when the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed." Then Joseph said, "Give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock if the money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph. And Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the cattle of the herds, and for the donkeys. Thus he fed them with bread in exchange for all their livestock that year. When that year had ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, "We will not hide from my lord that our money is gone. My lord also has our herds of livestock. There's nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants of Pharaoh. Give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land may not be desolate." Then Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. For every man of the Egyptians sold his field because the famine was severe upon them. So the land became Pharaoh's. And as for the people, he moved them into the cities, from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other end. Only the land of the priest he did not buy, for the priests had rations allotted to them by Pharaoh. And they ate their rations which Pharaoh gave them, therefore they did not sell their lands. Then Joseph said to the people, "Indeed, I have bought you and your land this day for Pharaoh. Look, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And it came to pass in the harvest and it shall come to pass in the harvest that you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh. 4/5 shall be your own, as seed for the land and for your food, for those of your households, and as food for your little ones." So they said, "You have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants." And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt to this day, that Pharaoh should have 1/5, except for the land of the priests only, which did not become Pharaoh's. Now, does that not sound like communism? At least socialism, where the government has everything. And we sit here. These people were starving. The Egyptians, the people in Canaan, they were starving. And they came to Joseph. Joseph's working for Pharaoh. He said, "All right, give me your money." All their money's gone. And then one thing after the other, they ended up having to become slaves to Pharaoh. And they would grow food for Pharaoh, which was now his land. Then he would get 1/5 of it. You know, what is your tax rate? Imagine it's pretty high. And you know, it's funny to me how sometimes when when I would teach the government aspect of my class in social studies. And I would ask kids, do you think that the government should just own everything? If they gave you a place to live, and they gave you food, and they promised to pay you, let's say, $10 an hour for the rest of your life, but everything that you needed would be free, how many of you would just work and the government gets everything and then they give you all that stuff? And the kids would raise their hand. You know, a lot of them would raise their hands. Yeah. Hey, I would work for the government. If they're going to give me a place to live and food to eat, I would work for the government. And then we would go through the different kinds of governments, and I would say, and they would come up with how much they would make on a regular job in whatever field they were interested in. You know, and at that point, they're going to be doctors and lawyers and all those kinds of things. They're going to be making millions of dollars. And so then they had to figure out how much of your money would you get to keep if you paid a 75% tax, how much would go to the government. And so then after that few, week of lessons, I say, all right, now, how many of you now would be able to work for the government and let them take care of you? And it's like, no, I'm keeping my money. So it's an interesting thing. But these people, it was a little bit different. And through Joseph's hard work and the way he took care of things, Pharaoh prospered, didn't he? I mean, he got almost everything that they had. And even though Pharaoh never, that we can read, this Pharaoh, and it will change, this Pharaoh would die, and there would be another one who's not so benevolent. But with this one, we don't see anything in the record that he ever, even though he recognized Joseph's God as being like wonderful and blessing them, there is no indication, there's nothing that says that he ever put his faith in Joseph's God, that he continued to follow the gods of Egypt. However, he prospered from the blessing that he almost ignored, that Jacob, that we talked about it last week. Jacob just blessed him with a blessing from God. And he doesn't hardly acknowledge it. He just starts talking about, well, Jacob, how old are you? But in spite of that, he becomes very wealthy and prospers because of Jacob's blessing. Now, how does that apply to us if we take the place of Joseph as a believer and the person over us has put us in charge of whatever it might be, let's say distributing goods. But when people come in and they say, well, I don't have enough money, we say, well, what do you have? You own a house? You own a car? All right, give me the title to it. And then I'll hand out some stuff to you. How would we feel about that if we were in Joseph's place and collecting things for somebody who is an unbeliever and is just trying to be wealthy? If somebody who is an unbeliever has authority over us, at what point do we draw the line and say, no, that's not right. We're not going to rob people of everything that they got. And should Joseph have done that, or was he just doing what he needed to do because he was trusting in God's ultimate will? That could be a hard thing to answer. At least I think it would be a hard thing to answer. If I had to take people's homes, all their money, their automobiles, their land, and then I say, okay, look, you've got this much land, you're going to grow this crop, and then I'm going to get a fifth of it for the government. I don't think I would feel right in doing that, unless I could put myself in the place of Joseph and say, God has a plan. He's promised us things through His covenant. This is not our land anyway. And God's plan will happen, so I'm going to do what my authority tells me to do, and I'm going to keep my trust in God. Is it possible that that's what Joseph was thinking? I mean, could you think that if you had manager or a boss and they were asking you to do some things and you didn't quite feel like it was the right way to treat those people, but you had been told to do it, I mean, where would you draw the line? That'd be difficult, wouldn't it? Your job would depend on it. People eating, especially your family who's there, them eating would depend on you keeping your job. And so that could be difficult. But the thing with Joseph and with Pharaoh, and him doing the job that Pharaoh had given him to do, was that even those who do not believe in God as a result of our testimony, hopefully they will at least admit that God has blessed them through our work ethic. We talked about that some last week, Joseph's work ethic. That maybe the way we work, we try to make them prosper, we try to make them successful. Hopefully, if we do what Joseph did, and we always give glory to God, that even if they don't believe and get saved, that they will at least recognize that He's made a difference in our life. They're going to have to deal with it. Be convicted by it. And it really, when it comes to somebody getting saved, we don't have the power to save anybody. We don't even have the power to make someone believe. We can live it out. We can testify of it. But God, the Holy Spirit, is the one that has to convict people. So a lot of times that's what He will do. He will use our life, our work ethic, our testimony, us not trying to build up our own name, but to get them, make them successful. God will use that to convict them so that they have to make a decision about it. And Joseph was the trustee for everything, every bit of food that there was in the whole land during this severe famine. And he was the distributor of it. And people knew they were going to die of starvation unless they gave whatever Joseph required of them. But now, what was there when they had food to eat? Did they think, well, I should have never given up my money. I should have never given up my livestock. I should have never given up the things that I own. What was their attitude? Verse 25. So they said, now who's they? People that's agreed to become slaves and give up a fifth of whatever they can grow to Pharaoh. They've already given him all their money, their silver, their livestock. These are the ones right here. So they said, you have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of our Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. So,
they're just happy to be alive.
Well, yeah, they just happy to be alive. And their children. Glad their children have something to eat. That also is a tough thing. Think, okay, how much will I go along with what I don't agree with so that I can get what I need for me and my family? Do I have to have this job? Do I have to go along with what I don't agree with? I mean, fortunately, I think most of us in the United States, we can change jobs. We can do a different career, or we can go somewhere else. But it was not like that for them. It was either do what they were asked or they died of starvation. It was either or. And it kind of gets to the place where we say, well, is it strange that God would use Joseph to feed Israel's enemies? To keep the Egyptians alive? You know, we read these stories sometimes and we don't think. Sometimes the ways that God works in the world, when we look at it through our eyes, thinking that we know right from wrong, and what we might do in a certain situation, it can look strange to us what God does. I think this is strange. We read in the Old Testament, if we go on to Exodus and Numbers, when God said to the children of Israel when they had the great army, go in and don't just kill their army, kill all their livestock, kill all their children. And that seems strange. But we will look at some reasons if we go on through that. I might just go on through the Old Testament till the Lord comes back. But some things that we read in the Bible can seem strange if we don't look at it. That God has a big plan and a big picture, and sometimes strange things happen with unbelievers that believers see and even get involved in, and we don't understand how it could be God's plan. But we'll see with Joseph and his descendants that God does have a plan for them on down the road, and it was necessary for them to stay alive. And so they went along with it. Them and the Egyptians went along with it. Pharaoh greatly prospered, and we've already talked about this stuff, so I'm not going to go on through that next paragraph, except for the Pharaohs and the Egyptians, this time of blessing would come to an end. And then when we get to Moses coming to Egypt to get the children of Israel who'd been slaves, and this is where it started, who'd been slaves for 400 years, and God sends Moses to bring them out of Egypt and out of slavery, then Egypt and its people are going to come under those curses of the Exodus and other curses. Right now, Pharaoh is blessed, but then he will be cursed. And in a similar way, the world that is robbing us and cursing us as believers in Jesus, the day's going to come when they're going to experience God's wrath. And they may think that they're getting everything they want now and they're moving towards this earth that they can preserve and clean and take care of, and that they can get control of everybody and set up a one world type government or global utopia, which is what they want. And they will almost get to that under the Antichrist. And people will think, hey, safety, prosperity, this is what we've all been wanting, is that somebody who could lead the whole world. And people will think for about the first year of the tribulation period that they've got what they want. And then when the seals and the bowls and the judgments start being broken and poured out, and all these things start to happen during those tribulation years, the judgment is yet to come. So when we see a wicked world, we've got to have a longer perspective about things. Realize there are some things in this crazy, wicked world that I may have to somewhat be a part of. I may have to be in a job or with a group that in my spirit I don't agree with anything that they're doing. But hopefully, at least the way I work and the way I live can be a witness to them. I don't agree with them, but hopefully my life can be a witness to them. But we realize that the day is coming when the Lord comes back that we will be taken out of all of that, and they will be left for His judgments, and the curse will fall. All right, then we go to verse 27. So Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen. And they had possessions there, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. When the time drew near that Israel, or Jacob, must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "Now, if I have found favor in your sight, please put your hand under my thigh and deal kindly and truly with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. You shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place." And he said, "I will do as you have said." Then he said, "Swear to me." And he swore to him. So Israel bowed himself on the head of the bed. So we come to this part now about planning the funeral. And Jacob realizes, he's been there 17 years, he realizes he's not going to make it alive back to the promised land. And so he wants to make plans to be buried in a certain place when he dies. And he knows the only person who is going to be able to carry that out, who has the authority and what he needs to carry that out, is Joseph. Beth, it reminded me of Lonesome Dove. He wanted to be buried in a certain place, and there was only one guy that could get him there. But it reminded me of that movie. Not that I'm recommending that you watch it, but it reminded me of that. When Gus died, his only request was to be carried from Wyoming back to Texas to be buried by the creek there. So anyway, this is what Jacob says, Israel says. I know I'm going to die in Egypt. I've been here 17 years, but I want to be buried with my fathers. How many of you have made plans concerning your death? Do you ever sit around maybe with your spouse and say, look, if I die before you, this is what I want to happen? Beth and I have done that. And then we both say, well, you're going to be dead, I'll do what I want to. But Joseph didn't say that to Jacob. Jacob made him swear. And there's no record that he ever tried to return to Canaan. Maybe he didn't want to leave Joseph. And when the famine was over, they were doing well enough, they could have went back. His whole family could have went back to Canaan. But they didn't. Maybe Jacob thought, I'm not going to take the chance on going back now. I don't want to leave Joseph again. That could have been a lot of it. Maybe they had prospered so much they didn't want to leave. I think that's possible as well. You know, when we think about our time, you know, a lot of times we hang on as long as we can to life, and you see people who reach an age, or they are like Israel, and they know that they're going to be dying soon, but they do everything that they can to live as long as they can because they want to be there for their loved ones. I mean, I think it's normal. It's not that we don't want to go to heaven. It's not that we're afraid to go to heaven. But it's just that we don't want to leave the people that we love. I told Beth if I'd have known what recovery was going to be like, I would have just not had this heart surgery done. I just went on to heaven this year when the Lord got ready. She said, oh no, you wouldn't have. You know, it's like Paul said, I'm ready to go to heaven, but I feel like I need to stay here with you. And so sometimes we want to put that off. It's not because we question what heaven is like or that we're going there. It's just we have people that we love. But then there are some people who don't want to go because they love the world too much. I know when I was a youth pastor and the young people say, well, Gary, I ain't sure I want to go to heaven. And then I would have others say, well, one girl said, I don't want to go to heaven and sit around and sing hymns all the time. So we had to have a discussion about that. But then I would have other young people who would say, well, I want to go to heaven, but I want to wait till after I get my driver's license. Or I want to wait after I get married. You know, things they wanted to extend it out because there was stuff here that they wanted to do. You know, and people have just bought something. I'm sure they want to hang around to enjoy this for as long as they can. So it doesn't tell us for sure, but he didn't leave in that time that he could have left. But when death got close, he wanted to make sure that the promises of the Abrahamic covenant would be fulfilled. Because God had promised him, I will get you back to the promised land. No matter where you go, no matter what happens, I will get you there. And so Jacob he believed that. He wanted that to be fulfilled. And we may not know, it's hard to know where and when our time is going to come, that we might pass away. Sometimes we get a chance to prepare for it. Sometimes we don't. I mean, you can walk out in our cemetery and see that there are those who had a chance to talk about it, prepare for it. They knew they had a limited amount of time, like Jacob. But then there are others out there that it was sudden and nobody expected it. And so we may not know where or when But we do know the destination, don't we? Where God has promised that no matter what happens around us, we know that He's going to get us to the promised land, to heaven. And so we have, we make plans about that, and we get ready for that, because we don't know when and where, but we know the destination, and we know that God will finish what He has started in our faith. And then we see that Jacob called for Joseph. And back up in that chapter 46, verse 4, Jacob had been promised, and it had been prophesied that Joseph would be the one that would close his eyes, or that would be with him when it all ended, when he passed. Joseph really was the only one that would have the authority or the means to take his body back to Canaan. His body, before they left, would need to be mummified. The Egyptians had developed this system to preserve a body through mummifying that body. So Joseph could have that done, and then he could be transported back to Canaan where he would be buried. So he called for him. And it's something here that God would use the Egyptian processes to fulfill His will for Jacob. And so sometimes that's the way it is for us. There's things in the world and they don't even realize it. The things that they come up with, God will use for us in our faith in Him. And then we come to this strange practice again that they had in this family. Abraham had his servant Eliezer to do this. And so it's passed down through the family. It's another one of those strange things that happened. But he had him to swear an oath by placing his hand under his thigh, and that's very private. And so that's where Joseph put his hand on his father. And it was a connection from the Jewish circumcision, that was part of the promise. That was part of the connection that was made. And so for Jacob to know that Joseph would keep his promise, that he wouldn't say, well, okay, well, you're dead, you died, Dad, so now I get to decide where to bury you and what to do with you. This is a solemn, serious swearing that when Joseph put his hand on his father in that place, he was saying, on my life, I will do what you asked me to do. And the thing was that if he didn't, then the other brothers, it was their job to make him pay for it, to hold him accountable if he didn't do what he had sworn to do for their father. So it's a serious matter. For us, it would be like putting our hand on the Bible in a courtroom, putting our right hand on the Bible and swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help us God. And then if we don't do it, what are we guilty of? Perjury. And if you are guilty of perjury, it can be a very serious crime. And so it was a similar thing. We put our hand on the Bible. Thank the Lord we don't put our hand where Joseph did. We put our hand on the Bible and we say we're going to tell the truth. If we don't, then we perjure ourselves, then there will be judgment for that as well. Jacob, at this point in his life, he has really matured. He's been faithful. He's believed in God's promises. But now we really see him wanting to be obedient in every way. It took him almost to the end of his life. God has promised He's going to bless him and his descendants, and He will. It has taken Jacob a long time to get to the point where he is right now. But he's there. And he was looking for God's promise to be fulfilled, and that's all he wanted. He wasn't looking for some great funeral, something wonderful that Joseph could have provided for him in Egypt, and marching down the street and have paid mourners and walking in front of him and the band playing and a large tomb in Egypt. He could have had that. But he said, no, I want you to take me back and put me in that cave and bury me with my fathers. So how does that impact how you would look at your own funeral? Do we want paid mourners? People who will scream and cry like they're going to miss us forever?
If nobody else does.
Yeah, you have to pay somebody to do it, huh? Do we want a big deal at our funerals? Or do we want to emphasize our salvation and the promise of heaven, the destination? What do we want our funeral to be about? So, we think about planning it. A lot of times we think about, okay, where's it going to be? Where am I going to be buried? Who can preach it? And, not tell any of the bad stuff and make the good stuff sound better. Who can do that? And then, who do I want to sing? And, all this stuff. And listen, I've been to some really planned out. I used to tease with Dana. I might have told y'all. Dana had like 3 pages of stuff. She wanted 10. There were 10 songs that she wanted sung, and half of the Bible she wanted read at her funeral. And her mama said, "But Dana, that's going to be too long." She said, "Mama, it's my funeral. People can stay as long as I want them to." But I kept talking to her because I was going to preach it. And I said, "Now, Dana, look, let's narrow this down a little bit." And so she did, and it ended up, it was great, because what she really wanted to do was people to think about Jesus and to think about going to heaven and her being there. And that's for Jacob, for Israel, that's what he said. Swear to me that you're going to fulfill God's promise and that I'll be buried with my fathers. I'll reach that destination that God ordained for me. And that can be the same thing for us. We're going to go through a lot of stuff in this life, just like these people are. We're going to go through a lot of stuff. A lot of it's going to be bad. A lot of it's going to be hard. Some of it's going to be strange. But we know who we can put our trust in. We know where our faith is. And we know what our destination is. And that gives us a lot of peace, doesn't it? A lot of peace and a lot of hope just to keep going, keep trusting, and be faithful. All right, do you have any thoughts or questions or comments? Don't ask me to go into more detail about this hand under the fire. You can research that if you like. So, if you want to know the details. All right, thank y'all. I do appreciate you coming out tonight. Will somebody lead us in a closing prayer?
Father, thank you for each and everyone so faithful to come out on Wednesday tonight to hear your word. We just pray, Lord, that you bless each and every one. Let us feel your presence in our life more and more each and every day. Lord, everyone that was mentioned tonight, we just pray that your hand will be upon them, Lord, and wherever their need is, that you will heal them, whatever that need may be. Keep us safe during the week, Lord, and bring us back Sunday. We thank you for being in our lives. Amen.
Yes, amen.